A while ago, we looked at some of the worst cases of the sophomore slump, analyzing the Housewives games of people like Siggy Flicker and Leah McSweeney, who came in strong their first season, only to blow it all in their follow-up year, tarnishing their Housewives legacy. But for today, I thought it might be fun to flip the script and take a look at some of the ladies who did the unthinkable, took either a subpar or all-out terrible first year and turned it all around, becoming some of the most loved housewives and making us forget we initially weren't that into them. This is relatively rare, as why would the show keep someone who either underperformed or were hated? But it's happened a few times, so let's look at those. If y'all can think of any other cases, let me know and maybe I'll make a part 2. Alright, so let's start with one of our more recent additions to the Housewives universe, Miss Lisa Barlow from the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Some of you all may be wondering why our baby gorgeous legend is even on this list, but think back to season 1 and remember who you were rooting for. If you're not saying Heather Gay, you are either lying or are a soothsayer, because in watching the show back, and with the benefit of hindsight I've gained from being able to watch 2 more seasons of Salt Lake, I can now see that the show really propped this up as Salt Lake City from the eyes of Heather Gay to Lisa Barlow's detriment. So most people seem to equate Salt Lake City with the LDS church, and the show really leaned into this. From the very first scene, the ladies are explaining the pursuit of perfection the Mormon church inspires, and the strict measures one must follow to be a quote-unquote good Mormon. I hope it's not too controversial to say that the average non-follower of the LDS church is maybe a little weirded out by it and would probably give it a thumbs down rather than a thumbs up. This is where I think the narrative starts to be set. Lisa comes on as a proud wife and mother who is Mormon by choice, though she bills herself as Mormon 2.0 and subscribes to a more DIY version and doesn't give in to a lot of the limitations the Mormon church stereotypically puts on its members, going so far as to own a tequila brand, Vida Tequila, of which she's really proud. Heather, on the other hand, along with her sidekick Whitney, are ex-Mormons and talk extensively about the trauma they endured from being born into the church. I think a lot of viewers can relate to religious trauma or expectations of feminine perfection, or the quest to be a good girl they felt has been lobbed on them by their culture. Whitney and Heather really led us into this aspect of their lives, and it was hard not to feel for them. Lisa, on the other hand, doesn't talk all that extensively about her faith, so I think it was normal that this aspect endeared viewers to Whitney and Heather and ostracized them from Lisa. And if you're thinking it didn't need to be us versus them, you're wrong. It did, because Whitney and Heather ensured it would be. To be fair, Lisa kind of started it when she told Jen that she didn't really know Heather and said that she was known for being a good time girl in college.
I think she was like the one that was like, honor code what?
Jen naturally reports this back to Heather immediately, dramatizing parts of the story to enhance its effects. Heather is really upset as A, she only recently became a good time girl and wishes she was able to be one in college, and B, Lisa does know her, and denying this is a way for Lisa to tear Heather down and demonstrates that Lisa thinks she's better than her.
I think Lisa thinks she's better than me. It's like she's ashamed to be my friend. I don't know you. You're not part of my circle. And it's a diss, and she's doing that because she's a bitch.
This narrative would carry on all season as both Whitney and Heather would constantly point out all the ways that Lisa would dismiss them or put them down. All of this seemed to really further paint this picture that Lisa was this judgmental popular girl bullying Whitney and Heather for being divorced or sexy or imperfect in some way. And I think they were pretty successful at painting this picture. Heather came on as perhaps the most relatable housewife of all time. I know she's having a villain arc right now as we end season 3, but when she first came on, she was funny and a good friend and supportive. She wanted to eat the lamb chop lollipops and was open about her vulnerabilities. She was a single mother who was trying to support herself and her daughters by starting her own business. She was trying to really get to know herself now that she was free of the conditioning she felt was placed upon her by her upbringing. She was perfectly imperfect, and I think a lot of viewers saw themselves in her or wish she was their best friend. Lisa was the diametrical opposite to this. She had it all, with the husband she was crazy about and the 2 boys she absolutely adores. She had a thriving business and was the queen of Sundance. And where Heather was open about her insecurities, Lisa was open about her unending confidence. When Mary hosted a Met Gala luncheon, she asked the ladies to reveal something about themselves the others didn't know. Jen talked about the pressure she felt growing up as the oldest child in her culture, Mary talked about her trust issues, and Lisa was brought to literal tears thinking about the high standards she places upon herself.
I always am trying to be my best self, and I'm not going to stop.
Now that I understand Lisa a bit better, I love it and see this as just Lisa being Lisa. But at the time, I think to a lot of the audience, it just seemed to be another way to paint this narrative that she's perfect and it seemed fake. When Heather was really putting everything out there and Lisa wasn't, it was easy to side with Heather and the Lisa-Heather dichotomy. It's funny because watching the season back now, I can see that she was the same woman she is now. She had all of her Barlowisms, such as trying to make a visit to the art shop a tactile experience.
All of these layers.
Can I touch?
Acrylic. You're my toucher, girl.
Yeah.
And gushing over everyone at Meredith's birthday party.
Love your jacket. Love your paint.
Love your hat.
Love your hair. Love your whole everything.
I think think we just had so many flashy objects with Mary M. Cosby and Jen and Brooks Marks that we, or at least I, didn't see how much of a silly character Lisa was at first. When the ladies take a trip to Vegas, we see Lisa make a bit of progress with Heather and Whitney when Jen goes psycho and they all band up to discuss how on earth they were going to deal with her.
Do you really want to be her friend after all of this? Because I don't. I'm being honest, I don't.
But after this, we see Lisa suddenly pledging allegiance to Jen, damaging her relationship with the other women, especially Meredith, who is upset that Jen has been talking about her marriage issues. It was at the season 1 reunion where I started to see Lisa differently, realizing that she was actually a legend, specifically when she gave Whitney and Heather their ship name.
Whitney and Heather, bad weather, tornado, spin the truth, destroy.
The reunion was all around a gang up on Lisa Day, and I started to see just how much she was taking. She points out that Heather had been setting this narrative on her and denies that she was judging bad weather in the ways they were perceiving. She also points out that it's really not her fault that they're seeing her this way. She doesn't care what others think of her, and I really started to believe it. It's kind of inspiring to me, honestly. We should all focus mostly on our own opinion of ourselves rather than other people's perceptions of us, but I think that can be easier said than done. Lisa really walks the walk on that. While Heather may be more relatable by being open about her insecurities, Lisa is more aspirational in her ability to accept and appreciate herself so deeply. I felt like she was starting to gain some fanfare after her reunion performance, but Heather was still the overwhelming fan favorite going into season 2. So while they were filming season 2, news broke that Jen Shah had been arrested and the whole thing had been filmed. We knew it was going to be the season of a lifetime, and boy was it ever. Lisa came in a hot spot as she was the only Jen defender standing, as every single other lady had fallen out with her, namely over Jen's unhinged social media post.
Did you like a comment referring to my son as a sissy bitch?
They all think it's kind of weird that she's so gung-ho on protecting Jen, and honestly, I do too. I do think Lisa is a fairly compassionate person and wouldn't want to see one person getting ganged up on. I've always gotten the sense that there's some other element at play when it comes to the women defending Jen. If you want to hear more talk on this, watch my video on Salt Lake City Season 3. So anyway, Meredith is especially mad at Jen and not keen to make up with her the way Heather does, so we start to see some cracks in the foundation of Lisa and Meredith's relationship right away, but they are still ostensibly best friends. Lisa brings in Jenny, remember her, which in hindsight was a terrible decision, but in the season it gave Lisa a much needed ally. Much needed as she was taking attacks from left, right, and center. Enter Angie H., Lisa's friend of 20 years who quickly turns on her for Whitney, who she's now cousins with. Angie makes her moment by accusing Lisa of sabotaging the catering for her Casino Royale party, and they fall out. This is not the only time Lisa would be accused of orchestrating drama, but she would later be accused of trying to set up Mary's church to be exposed as a cult, going so far as to bring on a former member of the church, Cameron, a friend of Lisa's, to expose this, but sort of keep Lisa's hands clean. This is kind of sly, albeit incredibly transparent. Lisa hosts a party for her son's male grooming business, Fresh Wolf, only inviting Meredith and Whitney. The Whitney invite is weird, because on one hand she is trying to get closer to Whitney at this point in the season, so it could have been an altruistic invite, but Whitney, bless her heart, is kind of a loudmouth and is a good person to feed info to if you wanted to get around. Unfortunately, Whitney can't attend, so Meredith is the only mark for Lisa's alleged scheme. At the event, she pulls Meredith aside to talk to her. Cameron approaches, cueing up John Barlow to pull Lisa away for a picture. Cameron then cryptically talks about his experience at Meredith's church.
Stick around and you'll find out.
And it changes, you're saying?
It changes.
Leaving Meredith reeling. It's really obvious what Lisa is trying to do, and Meredith is feeling kind of weird about it. To make matters worse, Lisa tries to play the middle in the whole situation. She stirs up the conversation behind Mary's back.
He mortgaged his house and gave her 300 grand.
But then buddies up to Mary to her face. Mary eventually catches on, putting Meredith in the middle between Mary and Lisa. We'll get to that because another major event has occurred. Jen has been arrested. Lisa doesn't know how to handle the whole situation, and her 6 lawyers are not able to guide her efficiently.
I'm physically shaking.
She'd already been questioning her friendship with Jen, feeling that the friendship is one-sided and that Jen is different when they are one-on-one versus in the group. So when Jen gets arrested, she has excuse enough to pull back, which of course enrages Jen. They nearly get into a physical altercation on the Sprinter ride to Zion, though they do come to a resolution. And then, of course, the Meredith of it all. We'd seen splinters in the relationship all season. They'd gotten into it at Meredith's Shabbat dinner, they got into it over Mary's cult allegations, they'd argued at Whitney's Wild Rose beauty launch, but Lisa finally reaches her breaking point on the cast trip to Zion, which you can get a full breakdown on in my Cast Trips Part 2 video. If you remember, Meredith and Mary had grown quite close, and with a lot of the cast being on the outs with Mary, Meredith was putting in double time defending her. Lisa felt like Meredith didn't have her back the way she did Mary, so after the other ladies rile her up about this...
You've been at odds with everybody. in defense of Meredith. I just felt for you, and I feel like...
I feel for me too.
She reaches the point of no return after another dinner of Meredith defending Mary while not defending Lisa. She storms off to her room and has a hot mic moment to end all hot mic moments.
Her and her dumb family that poses. Why don't you own a house? Wait, you can't. Because your husband changes jobs every 5 minutes?
This becomes an instant classic. It was brutal and absolutely decimating to every aspect of Meredith's being, but I think it became iconic because it was kind of hilarious. I mean, it wouldn't be hilarious if you were Meredith or her family, and Lisa definitely paid the price for it the following season, but the fandom was instantly hooked, transcribing the rant and placing it on coffee mugs. She has another brutal reunion because now she doesn't even have Meredith to back her up, and Jenny is really not much help. I think this was really Lisa's season, which is crazy when another cast member was arrested and another was accused of being a cult leader. I think with so much chaos, it started to interrupt that Mormon through line the show had relied on in its first season, and even though Lisa vs. Heather was still a factor to a degree, it wasn't the focus the way it was in season 1, and Heather wasn't quite the narrator of the story the way she was the first go-round. This made it so that Lisa wasn't completely painted as the enemy, and I think we as an audience were also really starting to understand her eccentricities. We see that the incredible sense of confidence she possesses isn't an act, and she kind of has a camp factor. She just has a funny way of saying things. I think we, or maybe I, were just taking her too seriously and didn't clue into her just being kind of silly. She's a good housewife, always keen to stir the pot, turn on her friend, and give us a snappy one-liner. She's a star and so much fun to watch. Alright, so let's go down south and talk about Miss Porsha Williams, who joined the Real Housewives of Atlanta in season 5. Now, some people may be questioning her inclusion on this list, as Porsha has really made a legacy as an iconic, fundamental housewife, but if you look back on her first season, she was very different. Don't get me wrong, she's still Porsha Williams, or I guess Stewart at the time, and has some of her most memorable moments in her first season, so take her inclusion on this list as more based on the differences in her demeanor and relationships with her castmates, which majorly changed between her first and second years. Atlanta is a franchise often associated with big names and notoriety, and Porsha kept that tradition, though it wasn't necessarily her name we knew, but those she associated with. She was the granddaughter of civil rights icon Hosea Williams and the wife of former NFL quarterback Cordell Stewart, who, judging by Peter Thomas's reaction to him, was a very big deal in the sports world. I think something key about Porsha in her first season is that she's very much defined by the people she's attached to, rather than her own legacy. This isn't necessarily a big deal, but it provides a stark contrast to her castmates, all of whom in some way made a name for themselves and were at this point more of career women, be it actresses, models, Grammy Award-winning songwriters, or attorneys to the stars/morticians. Porsha's proud of being a kept woman and reads very young, wearing cupcake type of dresses and being very deferential to her husband, with him almost coming off as more of a father figure to her than her husband. He's kind of more socially successful with the group than Porsha herself is. This is the Peter Thomas era where husbands were super crucial on Real Housewives of Atlanta, so we had a lot of couples trips and events. To me, Cordell comes off as the one who's the most eager to be there, but that's not to say that Porsha isn't engaging, she just fits in a little less. She seems to be a half generation younger than everyone around her. This is a source of tension with fellow rookie Kenya in particular. Just to back up briefly, Kenya technically was her introduction to the show when Porsha asked Kenya to come to her charity party for her grandfather's foundation. Kenya is immediately put off by Porsha asking her personal questions.
That's good. So are you married? That was out of the blue. So, are you married?
Which is hilarious because it sets off their series-long feud, one of the greatest of all time in my opinion, but is also kind of absurd because, like, Kenya, you're both on the show, of course she's going to try to get to know you. But Kenya is really on fire this season, overreacting to everything and starting problems with everyone around her. If you want to look at her season 5 performance, watch my top 10 rookies video. But yeah, so after Porsha mistakenly says Kenya's title is Miss America, not Miss USA.
Miss USA.
What was it?
Miss USA.
Miss USA. I'm sorry. We have Miss USA here.
Kenya has good enough reason to hate Porsha and carries this energy with her on their cast trip to Anguilla, where, after some prodding by Nene, the two get into the fight of the century, spawning Kenya's biggest catchphrase and hit single.
Well, you better preach now.
Right? Fabulous. Going with the wind, fabulous. Okay?
The two continue to clash all season. Luckily for Porsha, Kenya has managed to piss off every single cast member, so most of them buddy up to Porsha, creating kind of a little sister dynamic with most of the cast. The problem is that they don't really take her seriously, mostly due to how under Cordell's thumb she is. Cynthia tries to include her in her pageant she's throwing, but feels a little put out when Porsha won't let her have the meeting at her home because Cordell isn't there. When the ladies take a trip to Vegas, Porsha won't go to the strip club because Cordell wouldn't like it. He's already letting her on the trip after all.
Yes, let me, okay? And if you understood that, maybe you would get a husband.
The rest of the ladies think that this is weird and want her to stand up to Cordell, but for the most part, it's out of love. Nene especially tries to shake this traditionalist type of mindset out of her, and it seems to have worked a little bit because we do see her start to express some doubts about Cordell's control over her, especially in regards to the idea of them having a child. We start to see glimmers of future Porsha where she talks about wanting to have a career and be a mom, and seems to have changed her mind a bit from the initial commitment she made to Cordell about staying home full time. It's clear that there was really something to this, as our finale card tells us that he had filed for divorce. It seems as if the reunion was filmed before this actually happens, but while it was being orchestrated, because he doesn't show up to the reunion, but Porsha gives an incredible speech on who she is, who she wants to be, and how much she looks up to the other women.
I want to be strong like you. I want to have a career as well. I want to have my children, okay, that I take care of.
Andy has actually said that this moment was what gave her that second season. I think that while we saw that Porsha was incredibly funny and entertaining, she just didn't seem to mesh well with the other ladies. It seemed like she could possibly be a fit on other franchises, but it wasn't clear exactly what would be her place on this show. So when season 6 rolled around, it was refreshing to see a whole new Porsha. She and Cordell are in the thick of their divorce. She's really heard about the whole thing, saying she found out through Twitter. We see her feeling disrespected when she has her stuff moved over to her mother's house where she's living, and it's not treated with care. She talks a lot more about how she's protected him in their marriage and opens up more about the control he's had over her. Nene has really taken a liking to Porsha at this point. She was kind of checked out in season 5 as she was living in LA and wasn't around much, but now she's back in the A and is firmly picked aside in the lingering Porsha vs. Kenya feud. Porsha is kind of a broken bird, and this kind of becomes her role in the group. Where her youthfulness had made her seem disconnected from the ladies in season 5 because she was so attached to Cordell, she has now adopted a little sister type of role with all of the women besides Kenya, and now is really letting them in and allowing them to baby her a bit. She really leans a lot on the other women, and we get to see a lot of sweet moments of sisterhood arise from this situation. It does start to wear a bit thin, especially with Nene, who feels like the comfort and compassion only goes one way, but we see Porsha kind of just concede and admit she was wrong in this. We also see Porsha really step into this ditzy type of role. We'd had glimmers of it last season.
It's not just feeding the hungry only on Thanksgiving. It's an everyday situation. You know what I mean? This is 265 days a year.
265 days? Where the hell that bitch live at?
But this season she really whiffed it, especially when she thought the Underground Railroad was a real train.
It's not electric like what we have now.
It wasn't a train, baby.
She also buys a massive house that everyone wonders how she's affording, which she explains away as an investment in herself. The point is, she had really started to carve out a role for herself within the group as the younger sister underdog who provides a lot of comic relief. Porsha really started to feel like an essential part of the group, and her relationships with the other women really felt genuine. We also see her start to step into a sense of independence, making moves to carve out a career when she gets a part in Candy's play. She of course causes moments with this, and it was fun to watch Don Juan and Candy reacting to her silly demands.
Wait a minute. She thinks she's supposed to get the same billing as Eddie Levert or Shirley Murdoch?
She gets into drama, of course, especially with Kenya, but she's really just a breath of fresh air while this season's playing out. I think there's something really emotionally satisfying about seeing someone who is acting more as an accessory to her partner to realize that she wants something more for herself and go out and get it. She kept things mostly light this season, even staying out of the infamous pillow talk brawl, but at the reunion we get a glimpse into the intense, complex emotions that she wrestles with. Kenya was going after her, insulting her intelligence.
I would like Porsha to spell scepter. Go. We'll wait.
And just playing some prop work, and wasn't taking Porsha's hints that Kenya was past Porsha's window of tolerance, and Porsha reached her breaking point. This was obviously just a terrible situation. Kenya always has a wing to what she does on the show, especially in those early years, and was embodying the villain role because it was fun, but for Porsha in that moment, it was just too real. I don't need to say that it's never okay to get physical with someone, we all know that, and Kenya was right to think it was entirely too far, and I understand why she was wanting Porsha off of the show after that. But we also saw Porsha immediately say that it was wrong and immediately feel remorseful. She explains that she was in a blind rage and tells Andy that it was just her breaking point and all the emotions she'd pent up about the divorce and the prodding from Kenya she'd taken the past 2 seasons were just unleashed, and she lost control and let her anger get the best of her. It's not right, and I'm not defending her, but it was a moment of raw, visceral emotion that we all witnessed. I think this season took Porsha from an Alexis Bellino-esque Barbie doll she was in season 5 and showed us a story of a woman gaining her own identity, warts and all. Porsha has had one of the biggest stories of growth in Housewives history, but the biggest jump, I think, was between these 2 seasons. Alright, but let's head on down to Miami and talk about Miss Larsa Pippen, who is an OG cast member. The show seemed keen to feature her as she was married to basketball legend Scottie Pippen. Even though matriarch of the cast Leah Black got the first scene, we saw Larsa get double the scenes before Miami mainstays Alexia and Marisol were even introduced. Larsa seemed like a good candidate for the show. She was a true housewife, cooking every day and managing the housewife for her famous husband and 4 young children. She has a 15-year relationship with fellow housewife Christy, the ex-wife of another basketball player, and they were a duo of sorts. She had the wealth, the star power, she should have been great, but in practice, she was kind of a flop. She felt very 2000s to me. She seems very vapid, not having much interest in anything beyond herself, her family, and shopping. She comes off judgmental right from the get-go, laughing with Christy at Adriana shredding her stuff on the catwalk at a fashion show. She's super self-absorbed, deeming her own friends her sidekicks who will drop anything to go shopping with her. She had some feuds, which were all kinda odd. First, with the general concept of nannies. Most of her personal scenes, we see her complaining about how hard it is to find a good nanny. I love the idea of a feud with the nanny in theory, but there's no one nanny that upset her, it's all of them, which makes you kind of wonder if Larsa is the problem. This whole bit also comes off a bit questionable, as she's making a lot of comments about people not speaking English and things of that nature. She also feuded with the Miami legend Mama Elsa when she demanded an intuitive reading from her but doesn't like what she hears. This ends up getting a shade nasty and leads to a fight between Larsa and Mama Elsa's daughter Marisol during the commercial break at the live season 1 reunion.
You just said that Marisol is as old as your mother and obsessed with plastic surgery.
I think it wasn't a shock that Larsa didn't come back for season 2. Both her and Christy were given the axe and the series was revamped for a much more successful season 2. Larsa just didn't seem to have the pop needed to be a good housewife. She wasn't really funny, even unintentionally, and wasn't quite reactive enough to create fun feuds. She was pretty, but her outfits weren't very exciting. What she should have brought, which was the wealth and the fame adjacent, we got much more from Leah Black, so Larsa was really just not serving much, and they found much more dynamic replacements in Joanna, Lisa, Karen, and Anna the next season. In her time away from Housewives, Larsa split with Scottie and befriended the Kardashians. I don't really watch their shows, so maybe if someone who does can explain in the comments just how close their relationship was, but I guess they started publicly hanging out right after Larsa was on Real Housewives when Kim was filming a spin-off show in Miami. They hung out a lot until they had a falling out in 2020. I guess there was a lot of speculation around it as people were noticing they weren't at each other's birthday parties and that the Kardashians had unfollowed Larsa. People thought it involved something with Tristan Thompson, who I know is Khloe's children's father. There was speculation Kanye had something to do with it, but as far as I know, there wasn't a clear answer beyond speculation and rumors. So all this is to say that Larsa made a name for herself outside of Housewives. So when it was announced that The Real Housewives, which was canceled after season 3, was getting rebooted, people wondered if Larsa would be back, and it turns out she was. Like with her first stint, it seems as if production put a lot of cachet into her presence, and this time she delivered, albeit somewhat by force. The big story with Larsa upon her re-entrance was her foray into OnlyFans. Everyone is curious about it, with some being a bit more judgmental than others.
Instagram is PG-13. OnlyFans is X-rated. No.
Larsa is really open about it, saying she makes $10K a day. I kind of love that she was so open about this. As demonstrated by Nicole and Alexia in particular, it's something with a negative, sometimes shameful stigma. So I think Larsa not caring what other people think about it could really open up the minds of viewers. It also showed Larsa's growth as a person in her time away, as season 1 Larsa would have probably talked shit about it in a corner with Christy. She's also single now and opens up about the divorce in a way that I don't think season 1 Larsa would have. Still, despite her being transparent about these aspects of her life, she's not exactly an open book, specifically about what people were curious about the most, which is her fallout with the Kardashians. Larsa tries to play coy, but luckily Adriana has the same questions we all do and wears her down to the point where she's totally backed into a corner and has to respond, especially when Kim's ex-husband gets brought up in part.
Do I just say it? Kanye West's penis.
Where Adriana goes, Julia follows, so it's only natural for Julia to get up in front of everyone and announce that there's one person on the cast she doesn't really click with.
It's Larsa!
We also see Larsa as a duo with Lisa, and they're a fun pair. So I don't know if it's so much that Larsa made a radical change and suddenly was a great housewife, as much as her life got more public and interesting and Adriana forced her to engage. But either way, Larsa was a much more fun housewife this go around. She did seem a little primed by the Kardashian machine, where she felt she could pick and choose what she wanted to reveal to the public. But this is Housewives, and it doesn't work that way. Even if by force, Larsa ended up being a great addition to the Miami reboot and was a total 180 from her season 1 self. Alright, so let's move on back down to Atlanta and talk about Sidora, who joined the ladies in season 13, which was Atlanta's COVID season. I think when she first joined, she was a little confusing. She was brought on by Cynthia, and a decently well-known actress, most known for her roles on That's So Raven, the TLC biopic, and for playing herself in The Game, which hilariously causes drama with fellow newbie friend of LaToya when she gets mad at her for something her character did in the show.
I've been out before, and people have been wanting to beat me up, and I want to fight you.
This is my favorite type of drama, so I was loving this. Despite meeting and interacting with the ladies early on, a series of misfortunate events causes her to film most of her scenes in the first quarter of the season solo or with her messy husband, Ralph. Like, the first time we meet them, they get in a massive fight on their anniversary due to Ralph having just left the family for a few days and not telling Drew where he went. This becomes a recurring theme for the couple of him doing something super disrespectful and gaslighting her when she spins out about it. At one point it comes up that he was recording the family without their permission, which is kind of alarming. The whole situation is a lot to take in, and I don't feel like we knew Drew or Ralph well enough to really know how to react. It's kind of a third season housewife storyline, but it's what we got of them their very first scene together. It was just a lot, and I don't think we really knew how to react to it all. Add this to the fact that we didn't see Drew film with the group all that much early on due to COVID stuff and Ralph's dad dying, so it's almost like we had the Real Housewives of Atlanta with random scenes of this toxic couple thrown in. Ralph came off so horribly in their fights that it was hard to see why Drew would even stay with him. I think most of us were siding with Drew, of course, but it was just an intense situation that we were suddenly thrown in the middle of. Luckily, Drew was able to hobble her way back into scenes with the other ladies about a quarter of the way through the season. I should mention she was in a boot this whole time due to some issue with her Achilles. She's shocked when Kenya tells her LaToya was making fun of her wig, as she barely knew any of the women, let alone LaToya. This launches their epic feud that would follow throughout the season. This was what made me really start to warm to Drew as a housewife because it was kind of hilarious. LaToya has such star power to me. I didn't understand why she wasn't full-time and why she didn't come back, but some Googling clued me into some behind-the-scenes stuff that could very well explain it. But LaToya was like a mini early days Kenya, and as Kenya did with Porsha 8 seasons prior, LaToya decided that the best person to go after was fellow newbie, and a newly, sadly short-lived feud was born, and it was just super silly. After the wig fiasco, Drew deems LaToya her biggest fan and gives her a signed picture, which tickles all of the other women. Even LaToya herself admits it's kind of funny. They started to bond as fellow nieces. This was a quasi-alliance season with auntie and niece factions, but this is short-lived as Drew, who is apparently very religious, has her driver/assistant give LaToya a pep talk and encourage her to come to church, which makes Drew happy until LaToya starts allegedly seeing the prophet Lot, which majorly upsets Drew as she claims LaToya broke up his family and ruined her daughter's blessing, which was to be performed by a collection of all of the area's prophets, but they all ended up backing out due to the bad vibes LaToya created by allegedly getting with the prophet Lot.
She's saying that somehow it caused a ripple in the prophet community, and all the other prophets ditched her as a result.
Candy gets very invested in this saga, which was very funny to see. All of the women are kind of following Drew's chain of thought until they get the prophet on FaceTime and he denies it all. Drew counters this by playing a tape of the prophet admitting to having feelings for LaToya, which doesn't sway anyone.
Am I missing something? I didn't learn a damn thing from this recording. I'm about to turn the channel on this soap opera.
When Andy tells her at the reunion that when you bring receipts, they have to land, Drew creates a whole new genre of receipts.
These are spiritual receipts. It doesn't come in the physical. We're talking about something spiritual.
Okay.
It was all just really silly. Drew definitely came off a bit holier than thou, but I love when housewives act holier than thou, so I was eating it up. There were times that this feud got a little nasty, but both of them were able to navigate through it. I wish this feud could have lasted longer than one season, as it had such potential for a Porsha vs. Kenya type of base to last the Real Housewives of Atlanta through the 2020s, but alas, it did not. And it's not just LaToya that Drew feuded with. She also took on LaToya's mentor, one Kenya Moore of Kenya Moore Hair Care fame. Kenya was initially open to Drew, telling her that she would be taking a private jet on their infamous trip to South Carolina, but after some light shade thrown by Drew,
I mean, look, like, Kenya came and what she came with, and I think she's rocking it well. I mean, we do the best we can.
Did I just get wrecked?
Kenya gets annoyed when she feels Drew put her on the spot when she asked about the transportation situation to South Carolina in front of everyone. Their feud escalates on the trip when she's not getting why everyone is acting like nothing happened after everyone was mad at Kenya the night before, forcing Porsha to have to explain that that's just housewives culture. She does confront Kenya in game form.
We gonna play a game. Y'all excited? Yeah. Okay, so it's called the realest or the fakest. Yeah.
Which boded very well for me. Luckily for Drew, Kenya gets really into her investigation into who slept with Barlow the stripper, so she was out of hot water for a bit, but when the two meet up to hash things out, Kenya is very put off by Drew's vocal exercises. And when she tries to storm out, she is doubly disgusted when Drew wants to split the check.
Broke bitches split checks, okay? I'm not gonna sit here and calculate how much tax I owe on a check.
The last straw for Kenya is when she gets stuck with Drew's white elephant gift, meant to be a $1,000 present, which is just the wig LaToya made fun of her for, a cat carrier, a $100 donation to a pet charity, and the tape of the prophet's bombshell accusations, leading to Kenya once again storming out, only to be thwarted by some rogue Christmas carolers. Socially, she fared much better with Porsha, Cynthia, and Kandi, although Kandi lost a little favor for her with the whole prophet thing. Along the way, we had a lot of personal stuff from Drew. We did see a lot of fun moments with Ralph, which made their relationship start to make a bit of sense. And we also saw her reintroduce her son from a previous relationship to his biological dad. I think there were two major problems with Drew in season 13. The first really not being her fault at all, which is that Atlanta has had a really bad retention issue since like season 5. Every year it seems like we're introduced to new women, sometimes as friends, sometimes as full-timers, and they just don't last. It's hard to get attached to a newbie on Atlanta when you can almost be assured that you'll never see them again. I think because of this, both we as a fandom and the housewives themselves have grown kind of wary of newbies on the show. We're not super eager to get invested in new women, so I think we felt the same with Drew. Plus that season we had like 25 friends of and guests, so it was a lot of randoms to keep track of. Again, this isn't Drew's fault, and honestly it's a major testament to Drew that she was the first since Porsha and Kenya to last for 3 whole seasons on Atlanta. Unless, of course, you consider Eva. And after the news broke of her and Ralph's divorce, I have to imagine that she cemented herself as an Atlanta staple at this point. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The second big issue with Drew in season 13 is that her performance was very inconsistent and started off really shaky. In the first few eps, we don't really see her with the other women. We just get major drama that we're not yet emotionally invested in. And then when she was with the other women, we were getting a lot of contradictions, such as her being down to party with Barlow in South Carolina, and then clutching her pearls at LaToya and the prophet maybe engaging in a relationship, although also maybe not. I don't mind contradictions, but it was hard to put your finger on who exactly Drew was. I did know that I liked her and that I wanted to see more. So when season 14 rolled around, we had a major cast change. The show devastatingly lost Porsha in the midst of a massive scandal and gave Cynthia Bailey the axe, but finally gave Marlo a peach and brought back Sheree for a record-breaking 3rd time. It seemed like the show wanted to get back to its roots a bit and cut all of the new girls with the exception of Drew. Sonia, a 4-time Olympic gold medalist, is brought in and we have a whole new era. Drew delivers from the minute she appears on screen, talking about her own track star career as she goes to meet up with Sonia.
I could have went to the Olympics. I was a track star when I was in high school.
Who again won 4 gold medals for track, and talking about Ralph's football star career.
What position did you play, honey?
I was playing receiver at Rutgers. I didn't play it in the games, but I was just on the field.
As she goes to see Sonia's husband, Ross, who won 2 Super Bowls. Her and Ralph are having drama over him hiring an assistant who he was apparently getting massages from, and we get our annual blowout fight during a fancy dinner from the two of them. Their big issue this season was about him backing out of adopting her son Josiah, as he said that his biological father wasn't into the idea. He's also writing a book about being a step-parent, but he won't let Drew read it, though she is writing the foreword. A lot of what I was initially going to say about their relationship has kind of become irrelevant, as they recently announced that they are splitting up. Socially, Drew has a lot going on. She and Kenya decide to start fresh, and it actually sticks, and we see them form a real friendship throughout the season. I really love them together and hope that we see more next season. Kandi is once again invested in Drew's drama, getting really into the chronicle of the massaging assistant. Barlow also takes to her well. With Sheree, it's a whole different story. One of Drew's assistants, she has multiple by the way, used to work for Sheree and tells Drew that she didn't pay him, but tells Sheree that Ralph is gay. It's super messy and starts them off on a terrible foot that leads to low blows at each other's businesses and brings in props and sound effects when Sheree has her friend Fatum get involved.
Go pee in a bush. She's barking. She's your lap dog.
She also fights with Sonia, who she started out with as friends, even picking her up when she gets in a car wreck, but Sonia randomly lashes out at her, and it's not really clear to me why. She says she didn't like how Drew was treating Sheree, but I think it's more that she knew she had to fight with someone to legitimize her place on the show, and Drew seemed like the easiest target. She creates an iconic business, Drop It With Drew, claiming to have lost 25 pounds in 2 weeks, though the editors tell us a different story, and the women bring up the fact that she had surgery to achieve the results. The whole business is weird, and nobody's clear on what exactly it is.
Is it a meal delivery service? Is it a weight loss camp in Chicago? Girl, you know they ain't nothing but the Facebook group. Stop it, Drew.
The website doesn't work. It's incredible. All in all, this season, Drew proved herself to be an integral part of this modern era of the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Can we start calling it RHOA? Is that weird? I just don't like having to full out say the Real Housewives of Atlanta every single time. Let me know in the comments if we can make this a thing. Since the season didn't play into the nieces versus the aunties shtick season 13 did, her age didn't seem to be a dividing factor in connecting her to the other women. Her relationships felt real. She also was not afraid to show her mess, which I think is important for housewives. I think a lot of the times when a season is bad is because none of the women are willing to show their quote-unquote ugly sides, and it makes the show feel stale. I think it's understandable that as the women are on the show longer, they become savvier to the game and learn how to present a more clean image, but it makes the show boring for us viewers. Storylines start to feel crafted. I was starting to worry a little bit about the longevity of Atlanta because we've had such a long-running cast, and while they've delivered in their tenure, I was starting to wonder how much more they had to give. But with Drew Sidora, I think we're in good hands. And last, let's talk about Camille Grammer, the woman who embodies this concept so well, we could call it the Camille effect. So Camille was an OG on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and possibly the biggest get for the show, as she was the wife of famed actor Kelsey Grammer and was wealthy beyond belief. She refers to her house as a compound and has to drive around on a golf cart to visit the various sites on her property. Beyond that, she owns at least 7 houses and has 4 nannies, a house manager, and various tag-along friends who all seem to work for her in some capacity. She's really got a life any material girl would envy. But something about the vibe seems off, especially with her marriage. Kelsey leaves in the very first episode to move to New York for a play, telling us that it's about time Camille got a little attention, which kinda seems like a dig. With the other women, she's immediately a flop. They take issue with her having used a surrogate, assuming it was meant to keep her figure, and just seem to find everything she does grating, be it her impression of a British person,
cover your rat,
her dance moves, her relationships with her friends, or her relationships with her friends' husbands. I started to wonder if this could be some sort of tricky editing, where they're splicing all of the worst faces from the other women to paint this narrative, because the way the show portrays it, the women are hardcore haters. Real Housewives edit, if you're watching, let us know if you think something like this was afoot. But with that being said, the women seem to really not be keen on Camille. I think there could be a few explanations for this. First, let's talk about Camille and staff's theory that they're all jealous. I think there's some fair credence to be lent here. Right from the get-go, the BH women make it very clear that above all else, one must be wealthy and beautiful to thrive in Beverly Hills, and Camille is certainly beautiful and wealthy. But there's also this clear sadness in Camille that I think is evident enough that one might think twice before trying to pull a Freaky Friday and switch lives with her. Camille really leans on this theory, which her friends overwhelmingly back up, that women are just catty to her, and maybe there is some truth to that, but I think Camille also kind of tries to make people jealous. It's a bit weird to talk to your new friends' husbands about your breast implants, and she certainly wasn't shy to flaunt her wealth. Maybe it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy type of situation. A second theory is that it might just be Camille's personality, at least as it manifested in that first year. While eventually she was kind of alienated from the others, I think she first alienated herself a bit. She had an aloofness to her, and I think the other women may have thought that she just didn't really want to get to know them. She was the least connected to the group, who all knew each other to some degree, while her biggest connection was that Kyle's husband was her and Kelsey's realtor. I think living in this secluded compound and always being in Kelsey's shadow had kind of taken a toll on her, and she seemed to have kind of lost her ability to connect with others. It becomes clear that she must have experienced people wanting to get to know her to have access to her famous husband, and has created kind of a complex about this, in addition, of course, to the other complexes she has.
I have this Jesus complex, I think.
Yeah. All of this comes to a head when she has some off-camera conversation with Kyle about their spring break plans. Camille says she's going to Hawaii with the kids, cameras, and no Kelsey. Kyle apparently was surprised by this, with Camille assuming she was surprised that the cameras were following her but not Kelsey, and Kyle saying she was surprised because Camille wasn't bringing anyone with her, like a friend or anything. This has kind of remained a mystery in Bravo lore as to what really happened with this conversation, but here's my take. I think Camille was already feeling ostracized, and a personal trigger for her was people being more interested in Kelsey than her. So when Kyle asked if Kelsey would be there and was surprised he wouldn't be, she assumed the worst. Add in the fact that she was already feeling something was off in her marriage, it could have hit on that wound as well. I think this reaction was definitely rooted in paranoia and previous issues, but I do think that Kyle could have been giving out some judgy type of energy that Camille may have picked up on. Kyle has shown that she's very ferocious when it comes to her husband, and this conversation happened right after the Vegas trip where Camille was really strutting her stuff. Camille was also already kind of outcasted at this point, so even if Kyle wasn't consciously doing it, I think there's definitely a chance that Kyle was giving off some weird type of energy. But Camille took it in the worst possible way, setting off their incredible conflict this season. We had multiple flare-ups. First in New York, after Kyle tried to clear the air about the Kelsey Hawaii thing, making it worse by calling Camille insecure.
I just didn't know why you think I'm so insecure. You said it. I didn't say it.
Leading to an epic fight at a fancy restaurant.
You're such a f***ing liar, Camille.
But then the infamous dinner party from hell, which you can get a full breakdown on in my Psychic Storylines video. This was just crazy. It was an obvious setup with massive cocktails and Alison Dubois, Camille's dear psychic / monster of a friend, who was clearly there to pick at Kyle.
He will never emotionally fulfill you. Ever. Know that.
By the end of the night, it seems like even Camille thinks she's gone a little too hard on Kyle. It's great TV, but definitely doesn't reflect well upon Camille. Camille then threatens Kyle, telling her that she doesn't want Mauricio to be her real estate agent anymore, and suddenly Kyle has to try to make nice. They start to move forward, with Kyle even laughing off Camille giving her a book on how to behave and why, and are able to make nice for the rest of the season. This feud was just fantastic and a great way to start the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Camille was definitely at a disadvantage as she was going up against the show's anchor, who was coming off, for the most part, down to earth and likable, which majorly highlighted how up her own ass Camille was coming off. Every other housewife was siding with Kyle, and it was all around bad for Camille, but great for us viewers. Aside from her feud with Kyle, Camille was just kind of insufferable. She claims that she's more stressed out than the other women.
All of the women have very busy lives and they're very important what they do, but it just seems like I just have that 30% more.
But like, doing what? She has more help than anyone, with 4 nannies, a house manager, and whoever else, and really doesn't have all that much to do. She's decorating her apartment in New York and shooting Real Housewives. That seems to be it. She's also openly flirty with her haughty male friend Nick, kissing him in front of his wife. She's kind of just smarmy. Watching back now, I think she's fantastic television, but on my first go round, I was just at my wit's end with her. She was really hard to root for. But we did get some perspective on Camille's behavior towards the end of the season, when she tells us Kelsey had told her that he wanted to get a divorce. While the writing was on the wall, it was still sad to see the pain and heartbreak she was feeling. It was actually kind of a learning moment for me. I've noticed that anytime a housewife is just acting like a total monster, there almost always is something tragic going on behind the scenes, and this was my first time witnessing it. When the reunion happens, it's clear that Camille has gotten the message, though Andy makes sure she hears it.
Conniving, passive-aggressive, narcissistic, insecure, catty, jealous, cruel.
She of course has her spats, especially with Kyle, but most of the women rally around her to support her against Kelsey and the American public, who have deemed her the most hated housewife in America. So when season 2 opens, we've got a whole new Camille. The divorce is finalized and she's been on a healing journey. It's opened the door for relationships with the other women, and her and Kyle have grown really close. She seems to be more lighthearted, guest starring on a role in a sitcom making fun of herself. She's just coming off way more down to earth and open to connection. Absolute chaos is happening around her with the other women. Taylor's in a suitcase, Kyle and Kim are still on the rocks from the limo fight, LVP is starting to get accused of leaking stories, but Camille is just chilling, doing her thing and being sweet. She bonds with Brandy when she enters, as their divorce stories mirrored each other, and is able to keep her disdain of Dana Pam to her confessionals.
Most people that have a lot of money don't really brag too much about it, and that's the honest truth. They kind of keep it to themselves.
She seems to be adopting a hands-off approach to conflict. She kind of just sits there during the game night fight, being a listening ear for Brandy, but not getting involved and standing up to Kim and Kyle. But when LVP gets the girls together for a tea party, Taylor decides she's going to air her Vanderpump grievances, and nobody backs her up. This frustrates Taylor, calling Camille out for not having her back, which causes Camille to call Taylor out for not being open about her domestic abuse.
He hit you. We don't say that, but now we said it.
This situation is just yucky, especially with the hindsight of knowing how far the abuse went and what happened with Russell. I get that Camille and the gang were frustrated that Taylor would open up about the abuse in private, but then expect them to treat Russell as if nothing had happened when they saw him. But this whole situation really could have turned out darker than it actually did, and Taylor was right to be absolutely terrified that this was outed on camera. I think we all look back at both the "now we said it" line and the Taylor versus the cat meme as so funny and iconic, but it's actually like super grim. I don't know, maybe this is one to be chalked up to a testament to how far we've evolved as a culture in such a short time, but the situation is weird to look back at. So Taylor tells Russell what happened, and he sends Camille an email threatening to take legal action against her, leading to Taylor being kind of ostracized from the cast. Everyone rallies around Camille, and the Armstrongs aren't allowed at the white party, and Taylor isn't on the cast trip to Hawaii. It's all around a demure season for Camille, and this actually gets brought up at the reunion. There's literal talk about the differences between seasons 1 and 2 Camille, and everyone talks about how much she's changed. She claims that she didn't make a conscious effort to act differently, just that she was super stressed out the previous year. I think it's got to be a combination of both. Yes, she was undoubtedly stressed out. Her marriage was falling apart, and her life was suddenly much more public than it had ever been. But I think there had to have been some sort of meetings with a PR firm or something to figure out how to come across more likable. Whatever she did, it worked. I'm a diehard Camille lover now, and aside from her absolutely bizarre moment of comparing herself to Brett Kavanaugh in season 9, she's mostly maintained the good graces she earned with the audience that second season. She created the blueprint for how to turn things around, and I think this can be a lesson that you can always recover. So those are the 5 best examples I could come up with of housewives turning around their image after a subpar rookie season. Let me know if there's anyone you think should have been on here that I left off, and maybe I'll do a follow-up. This video was a massive labor of love, so if you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to connect on social media, my ads for Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are at deeplysuperfish. I'll link them in the description. If you have an opinion on any of the women in this video, please give me a write-up in the comments because I love to read them. But I think that about does it for me today. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!